Created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm, and
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, that humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that.
Audio, the text, and then there's big metaverse bug. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
Okay. Mic check, mic check. Cool. Live stream is on. Good to go. Welcome to another session of AyAyAyAI. We've been doing this for 5 years now, and this few weeks of AyAyAyAI podcast have been amazing because people are moving from knowing to doing. People are actually making decisions. Executives, leadership, shop floor managers, everybody's jumping in, right? Everybody's saying, I see the value now. I need to, adopt it, implement it. A lot of questions. Where do we even start? Mostly, a lot of people are looking for that framework, right? They're looking for that framework to say, if I get started here, where do I end up, right? What is my OpEx and CapEx looks like 5 months from now, 5 years from now? And that's the ultimate place that we wanted everybody to be in, because 10 years ago, conversation about artificial intelligence was far different than what it is today, right? You can go to YouTube and look up videos from 2017. Maybe some people have talked about attention is all we need. The reason you don't know about attention is all we need is because it's a paper that Google put out, and because of that is everything you're seeing today. This large language model, this capability of answering things far better than Google search, is coming from that attention is all we need methodologies, the framework, right? So the way of doing accelerated computing has shifted since 2017 to a level right now that is unprecedented, of course, but it all generates somewhere, right? So the frameworks has been somewhat of behind the scene, behind the curtain kind of conversation. But in our podcast, one of the things that we focus on is the process and people that own that process. So people that own any process, if you're a business owner, manager, data stakeholders, or some sort of business investor, you have to really think through this framework because you have a skin in the game that nobody else does. So for you to understand the process and the people side and see it from a high level is very important. And very important in the sense that you don't need to know attention is all we need. Attention is all you need as a paper. You need to understand why that's dramatically shifting the 2023's ChatGPT. Why does that impact us going forward as far as limitation comes? 5 years from now, that's going to be a limitation actually, right? Because it's something that when you're trying to accelerate computing, because that's what we're experiencing right now, if you call it AI, just call it accelerated computing, right? It's far easier, far more realistic than to call it intelligence. Almost non-existent intelligence with what we see today. So the fact that these attention is all we need is about 9 years old at this point, and then moving forward, we cannot keep using accelerated computing through attention is all we need. So we really have to start understanding it from, yes, I know that people needs it, people needs to be upskilled and professionally developed, but if the leadership is not really pushing for that with their specific business needs and changing the process, all of a sudden what's being delivered through that process suffers either low quality, low volume, or degradation of the product services. So there's a whole lot that is happening today that we cannot keep up with. So one that is in everybody's minds and ears right now is Mythos, and I would like to urge you and bring this to your attention that Mythos and Project Glasswing is attention is all we need from 2017 for 2026. Mythos is not something that you're not going to find a lot of information about, because Mythos has been around actually since 2024. It's not something new. And because it's not something new, we have known Mythos' impact for a long time. It's just that it didn't come from Mythos. It came from other systems. And we can go into the whole the conversation about it's a marketing scam or something like that, laced in marketing, right? It's just all being publicized for the marketing purposes. Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. This is a marketing genius 101. However, the danger is real, because the infrastructure side of it, the hardware side of it, is something that has really haven't felt the vulnerability the way Mythos is bringing to the surface. And of course, we can talk about Mythos all day long. But look, Mythos gets super technical for super coding purposes, right? How it does things, it becomes very technical. But you can imagine from a human perspective that if somebody gives up, a person that gives up a task and AI doesn't, and AI really wants to accomplish this task, what do you tell that AI, and how do you enable that AI to complete that task, right? When humans have to go to sleep after 16 hours of being awake, all of a sudden the system is working extra 8 hours to get that task completed, right? And that task just happens to be that it wants to destroy all the average codes that has been in the ether for last 20, 30, 50 years now, right? Open BDS, free BDS, FFmpeg, these things are not new. These free resources have been in place for decades with minimal disruptions of their services. And major corporations, Project Glasswing companies that are listed, they are top clients of OpenBDS. And we can go down to that rabbit hole of bill of materials for OpenBDS some other time. But today's focus is to talk about management. We're going to talk about management. We're going to talk about change management, decision management, and of course, the risk management side of things, which goes not only to the cybersecurity, but legal liabilities, right? But of course, we're going to try to do that under 45 minutes. I know everybody's busy. Everybody doesn't have time to spend hours and hours. We used to do this podcast for 2 hours, but we cut it short. We are down to 45 minutes now, right? To make it somewhat of a fast learning opportunity. These are knowledge nuggets. You're going to hear some technical words, and those technical words might sound foreign to you, like CBOM, cryptography, bill of materials. We'll talk about that as part of your risk management. But one of the things that we will try to talk through is this technical terminologies with business language, right? If you're executive, if you're in a leadership position, if you're trying to make decisions, how do you optimize your decision making? And how do you understand yourself, right? What's the first rule of doing business? Know your product. And what's the first rule of being successful in the business is know thyself. What are you capable of to create as a product? So known known, known unknown, and unknown unknown, right? These are some of the things that we'll talk about, because as you're listening through it, you'll say like, okay, look, I don't have to go and research it right now, but I have to keep that in the back of my head somewhere, because when you're in a team meeting next time, you're a consultant who's going to talk to the business owners or the clients. You really have to think through how those clients are thinking. What are their past looks like? What are some of the things that they're trying to do in the future? Because their past will indicate how much they can accomplish in the future. So you have to know yourself, you have to know your clients, you have to know your product, you have to know your business, and you have to know the person to your left and right, because they're going to be there to help you to travel through these known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So one of the things that I will do is actually utilize my handy dandy YouTube friends that I do not know them in person. So I'm going to use their video, and I give all their credits to all their work. So have a listen. But the first one that I'm going to show you, if you're not familiar with IBM technology videos, I would say spend hours and days on it, because the amount of information that will just all of a sudden click through your head, because the way they present this information, it works, I think, at least for me, it works very, very well. And I've heard nothing but good things about IBM technology videos, because people that I've recommended to, they came back and said, wow, this drawing and these conversations in a small 6 minutes, 10 minutes nuggets of conversation really does pay off. So we're on a 10-minute mark. We have 35 more minutes to go, but let's start with this video and we will get the conversation rolling.
And then there's the whole issue of trust too. When an AI recommendation is accompanied by an accuracy percentage, which indicates how likely this prediction is to be correct, humans are less likely to incorporate the AI recommendation into their decision, regardless of the accuracy percentage being displayed. Basically, we don't like recommendations that openly tell us that they might be wrong. So we've seen that who should make a decision, a human, an AI, or a human assisted by an AI recommendation, is something that we can derive. We can move from subjective decisions to the quantifiable, that for a given decision, who the most effective decision maker is likely to be. And when the most effective decision maker is a combination of AI and human, that's augmented intelligence, we must consider presentation of that augmentation to minimize human cognitive bias in the decision-making process. Brought together, us humans and AI algorithms make a pretty powerful team. We can improve decision-making outcomes if we just know who to ask.
All right, so you just saw what the gentleman in the video mentioned, that if you're asking questions, who are you asking that question to? How are you asking that question? What is the answer that you're looking for? What are some of the biases that you have towards that answer, right? Because it can be AI everywhere, but no use of AI because it doesn't necessarily get you the answer that you are needing, right? That you want, but you are not sure about how to augment that answer to improve and qualify that answer for the specific decisions you're making. So when it comes to decision management, which we will talk about after this change management section, I brought up the decision management because OCM, the organizational change management, is the key component for sustainability. And that's a conversation that goes really missing in a lot of the conversations that we've had, is that they want to understand the technological stack. They have lots of good understanding of technology because technology is an easy buy, easy yes, and easy implementation. But once you have that in place, now they realize that a year or two later, there's going to be a need for change management. So conversation happens that buy now, and then figure this out later, right? Last episode, we talked about ready, fire, aim, right? Ready, fire, aim is the wrong way to go. It's ready, aim, then fire. So in the ready part of it, you really have to focus on organizational change management. This change management means that you have the people, process, and technology all in a whiteboard. And in that whiteboard, you can get buy-ins from every part of the organization and then figure out a process that you can live with, right? Because if a process is not sustainable, that's the process that needs to change. And if the process is sustainable, that's also scalable, right? The system that is sustainable is because it's not vulnerable to cybersecurity. They're not able to hack in and stop the process from happening, disrupting the process. So that means if it's sustainable because it's secured and many other things, now it's scalable. And if it's scalable, of course, it's interoperable. That's just because the reason you scale it is because it's interoperable. So we call it KISS, K-I-S-S, and you'll hear me say that KISS a bunch of times in the management. KISS for AI comes from DevOps. In the DevOps world, it's keep it simple and stupid in product development. So KISS for AI means that if you know how to answer those three questions, now you have a change coming, because that change has everybody in the whiteboard, everybody's able to participate, and everybody's able to say, okay, I don't see anything wrong with the sustainability part of it, right? No challenge here. So scalability, let's move on with the scalability. Oh, okay, we can do scalability, that's fine. But the rest of the business looks at it and say, well, that's not interoperable to the way we need to do our business. Pause, right? Pause. Like, we can't move forward anymore. Like, let's go back to the drawing board again, maybe start talking from the interoperability aspect of it, right? If you start with interoperability, then you think about scalability, get everybody's consensus on interoperability, get everybody's consensus on consent on the scalability, and then sustainability, right? Sustainability, if you can answer all three of these questions, you pretty much have buy-ins from everybody. As long as there's no objection, you don't have to go back to the drawing board all over again. So when you're in the room with people and you are trying to figure out the process that you have currently, the as is state, and then you have a to be state, in that to be state, you want to be able to talk about your known knowns, right? What are you comfortable with, right? Things that you know. You know a lot of things, right? You know that AI will help you with productivity. AI will have tokens that you have to measure, and these tokens are different measurement than the previous measurements that we used to do, which was pretty much in the control of IT's hand. But now you're looking at tokens that are in employees' hand. So it's a two different dynamics. So you really have to talk about the tokens. That's your known. Because last episode we talked about tokenomics, token operationalizing, and a token usage and the danger of token usage. So these models will require governance. You know that because the amount of models that you put in place. These are AI machine learning models, so you have to have MLOps for that. Because these known knowns, if you see AI, you're going to see AI ops. If you see machine learning, you're going to see MLOps. If you see the large language model, you're going to see large language model ops. So the governance has to be there because that's probably your job, or somebody's job is to do just the compliance piece, right? And then you guys have to meet in the middle and say, yep, what are some of those use cases? How can we move forward with that? Because our known now is in the whiteboard. Let's talk more about it. These kind of conversation in the boardroom can happen very much because of the employees, the organizational leaders, the managers, all level of people have been enabled with AI information, not because of AI, but for the business process and the business process the need for AI. See, you understand the business process and AI far better if you look at it from your day-to-day operation, your risk management, your revenue generations, and so many things. So when you're enabling an employee, you don't want to send them to school for 20 weeks and have them try to understand AI, because that doesn't work. Because AI universally is far different than the AI that is your business process specifically. So you really have to have training sessions that is for your conference room specifically. But as you're going through the OCM process and the whiteboard, one of the conflicts that you will have is your known unknowns. Known unknowns is what stalls a lot of the decisions, because we haven't even touched the unknown yet, right? Known unknown is very contentious because your ability to convince somebody or ability to persuade somebody, negotiate with them, really kicks in. So this is where your emotional intelligence is in a high gear, because you have to use those tools in order to get them to say, we're okay with known unknowns, right? We know we have known unknowns. What are some of the known unknowns that you can talk about in your organization? If there is a vendor and their model is something that you are reliant on, what happens if they disappear? What about your data ownership, data portfolio? Is your asset management and asset protection involve your data management and your data protection? Do you have a portfolio of data portfolios, sort of the way you have asset portfolio, right? If you have real estate portfolio, do you also have a data portfolio? If you don't build your data portfolio, what are some of those unknowns that you will face down the road? So you have like regulations that people will talk about. There's unknown unknowns because there's GDPR in Europe, but there's nothing in US yet. And what happens if your data comes from Europe, and if you have to expand your market to Europe? What are some of the cautionary steps that you can take today that helps you to expand the market into European Union as well? So these succession plans, these are some of the things that you have to talk about your known unknown. That if Tommy and Jimmy sits down and does a great KISS model for AI, who's going to take over that project once Tommy and Johnny and Timmy are gone, right? Who's going to do the succession? Who's going to take over that? If they do take over, what sort of monitoring and triggering information can they not see because they don't have the historical insight that you have currently and you developed it? So you really have to figure out the documentations and those sort of things for your organizational change management as well. Your unknown, and we will talk about this a little bit more from the cryptographic perspective, because everybody knows unknown to be a quantum computing state. If you have quantum computing, and quantum computing is the threat to your encryption, that encryption threat, you can do something about it today. Maybe you can converge that unknown into your known unknown. Your known unknown, that is, you have encryption. If you don't know encryption, you probably can come together as a team to say, hey, how important is encryption to you? And where are we using this encryption today? So this is called CBOM, cryptography, bill of materials, to figure out an inventory, audit your process and say, if we have to wipe those encryptions out of our way to do business in the future, how do we plan for that, right? Now, I'm going to tell you something that might sound a little bit too technical, but the reason I say cryptography is because when people think of machine learning, they said, well, you know, what about quantum computing? You cannot do quantum computing unless you do machine learning, unless you do your data structuring, unless you do all the things that are necessary for your AI ops, ML ops, and LLM ops, and DevOps, and data ops. These are no different. Quantum computing is one layer down from the atomic level transistors that we use today. These transistors are what's making your computing happen. So if those computing was to disappear, all you have is a layer that is removed so you can go layer deeper, right? If you go layer deeper, that's what the quantum is. But quantum is not removed from all the systems that you see up here, which is your statistics-based, mathematic-based solutions that you're enjoying through ChatGPT and large language model or self-driving cars. Those are all based on things that are one layer removed from quantum computing. So the pricing is something that is unknown as well, because last episode we talked about memory, and memory adds to your OpEx. Well, if memory adds to your OpEx, what do you do today to make sure that if the cost balloons, and how do you do shift from wherever that cost center is to move it to a profit center, so that way the profit center has the same amount of token usage, but now you can scale that token usage from existing profit center. So profit center means that those tokens did not impact your operational expenses as you implemented them in the, say, 5 years ago, right? 5 years later, you have a great profit center, but the other part of it, the cost center, did not have that large language model in place. So if you have something that you're implementing in your profit centers, how do you take that process and implement it in your cost center? So that way you're trying to reduce this ballooning cost, which if you have used cloud and a few other technology recently, like Kubernetes, you're probably going to see how that plays out in your large language model as well. We're not even going to talk about legal side of things, but that's a bill of clean health, the due diligence that is necessary before you deploy. And that is a huge conversation that you have to have, but probably with a specific type of audience in place first, rather than all out with the employees. So this organizational change management is going to really dictate how far and how fast you can move. But the rule here is that if you want to go far, you got to go as a team. Right? If you want to go by yourself, you'll go somewhere really, really fast and really, really quick. But if you want to really go far, you got to bring the team with you. So with that in mind, let's get into the next video, because I think this gives me a way to kind of explain things to you so you don't have to listen to me the whole time, because I really, really go fast, and I don't mean to turn into a lecture, but I do want to hit some points, and these videos really helps to get this point across.
Is it useful to think about, will there be an AI winter? Because there's always these patterns, like is this endless summer? It's something I constantly think about, because do I just get endlessly hyped and just trust that I will only be early and never wrong? Or will there be a winter?
So there's something about, say the following, there's something about AI that has led to this repeated pattern. And you guys know this.
It's summer, winter.
And it goes back 80 years. Yeah. 80 years. So the original neural network paper was 1943, right? Which is amazing. That it was far back that long. And then there was, if you guys have ever talked about this on your show, but there was this, there was an AGI conference at Dartmouth University in 1955. Yeah. And they got an NSF grant to for all the AI experts at the time to spend the summer together. And they figured if they had 10 weeks together, they could get AGI out the other end. And they got by the way, they got the grant, they got the 10 weeks, and then 1955, no AGI. And like I said, I lived through the 80s version of this, where there was a big boom and a crash. And so there is this thing, and there is something about AI that causes the people in the field, I would say, to become both excessively utopian and excessively apocalyptic. And it's probably on both sides of like the boom bust cycle. You kind of see that play out. Having said that, I think what's actually happened is and we now know in retrospect, like an enormous amount of technical progress that built up over time. And like, for example, we now know the neural network is the correct architecture. And I will tell you, like, there was a 60-year run where that was like or even 70 years where that was controversial. And we now know that that's the case. And so we now, everything we're building on today sort of derives from the original idea in 1943. And so in retrospect, we now know that like these guys were right. They would get the timing wrong, and they thought, capabilities would arrive faster, or it could be turned into businesses sooner or whatever. But like they were fundamentally, the scientists who worked on this over the course of decades were fundamentally correct about what they were doing. And the payoff from all their work is happening now. And so the way I think about what's happening is basically, I think about basically the period we're in right now is I call it 80-year overnight success, right? Which is like,
yeah. So we've heard about that term that overnight success comes with 10 years of staying awake, right? So this is important because what we're about to discuss is decision management. If we talk about decision management, some of the things that I will try to emphasize over and over through decision management, but in case I forget, I'm going to start with that, right? Emphasis is a community of practice. Emphasis on decision management is community of practice. If you are engaged in community of practice, you cannot go wrong. Sometimes you rather slow down rather than to go fast, because you have to have a plan in order to go fast. And community practice is a great way to not say we're going to plan in 1 day or 1 hour, but we'll continuously plan twice a week until we know we can do it once a week. So this is a community practice that you can say, look, our revenue is great today, but we really have to make a decision about future of revenue, right? Future of revenue as in where's our SWOT analysis, right? Strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats for our business, but also our operational procedures, right? Our standard operating procedures. Is there a SWOT to that? Can we do a SWOT analysis of that? So if you think about an organization that says like, we're not ready for AI, we're not going to do anything with AI, we're going to kind of stand back. There's few things you can do while you're doing that, right? Which is to develop that COP, so that way you're measuring your threats from the outside of how you will be attacked and how to prevent those attacks at minimum, rather than to say we're just going to jump in the deep pool and go for swimming with AI. Okay, it's your decision, but you have to make that decision up front. And one of the things that you should not, and I highly recommend you don't, is community of practice as your go-to, right? Which is that you must not let go of community of practice. You have to develop that community of practice, build on that. And even if you have all buy-in with AI and usage of AI, you have to have a community of practice. This is a must. This is something that if you look at the Wall Street, the SaaS apocalypse, you should look at the Wall Street that collapsed because of AI did not provide ROI. Wall Street will indicate that it was people side of things that fell apart, not the technology side of things, because the process was weakly built and the people that was there, they were not enabled with process information and process with AI specific information. This is a major problem. You can get training all day long, but if you don't look at it from your business perspective, personalize it, curate that understanding of your business process, people are not going to shift their way of doing things without AI, because what they know works is how they've been doing it for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? So why change it today because of this gimmick called AI? And you've heard that. These are the individuals that has been through these topics. So if you're a consultant, this is specifically for you. If you're a consultant, you really have to take into emotional intelligence in consideration, because as you're discussing with somebody who has made so many decisions in their life, you really have to articulate them, not the use case, not the opportunities, but the possibilities of optimizing it, possibilities of optimizing that we've been working on for the last 80 years. Because one of the things about AI winters and AI summer is that you have AI summer, but the residue of that AI summer sticks around even in the wintertime. So is there going to be a winter coming anytime soon? I believe so. I think the hardware is going to be a choke point. So you really have to think about decision making about your hardware, owning this tokenomics rather than owning a cloud vendor, right? Whatever the case is, you have to have an ownership of your hardware, because this hardware is going to be a choke point for your AI winter before it arrives. So as you're going through the AI winter, one of the things that you have to carry forward with is how you do LLMs. How are you doing quote unquote intelligence, right? Are you doing software 3.0 adoption? Do you have a community of practice that says we are going to be in a software 3.0 era? Software 3.0 is not about software engineers anymore. It's not about coders and programmers or IT department. It's about us. 99% of us is going to be a coder. We're going to live through the software 3.0. We have to prep for it early. that is not about just training. That is about decision making, organizational change management. That's your process adoption of artificial intelligence. And many of the decisions you will make, that will be made by your human counterpart and your AI counterpart. That is, you're working with somebody along with you're working with an AI system that lives off of a token. So if we were to summarize everything that needs to happen in organizational change management and needs to happen in decision management, one of the things that I really articulate to companies that are big, and they say, well, Asif, how do we own the process from top to bottom? So I talked to you about hardware, right? The decision is something that you have to make early because the hardware shortages are not going away anytime soon. So you really have alternatives to the hardware as well, which is that you will have memory problem. You already have CPU problems. You already have no access to GPUs unless you rent or borrow them. And then you're going to have future problems of just the way you use device today. Your competition will try to IP their workflow, right? So what your competitions are actually going to focus on is, where are my vulnerabilities that what used to be IP around my product, the moat around the product, now people will want to know how it is that you actually do the process, right? You have to cover your process very, very well. So when we talk about cybersecurity, we talk about like, oh, I'm just going to steal the data and move on, right? It's not about that. It's about espionage of the process. How do you do the process? How can I interrupt that process? And if I can interrupt the process, how can I make it long lasting, right? So the C bombs and things of the nature that we're talking about, it's not that far off. But you have to make a decision about, you're no longer trying to protect the product, you're trying to protect the process that you have built with your people, because your people is your ultimate business, and then the process that you have is your IP from now on. So when you have that mind shift and mindset, really people get engaged. People, they say like, well, our product is no longer a moat for us, it's the process. We have to really figure out how to protect our process, how to keep quiet about our process, and make that process work in a very optimized fashion with minimal risk. Tokenomics. We will talk more about tokenomics in your decision science, decision management part of it, because when we're talking about optimizing the prompt, that is a key example of what sort of decisions are you making today. So if you're making a decision about using tokens because ChatGPT is only $200 a month for you, yeah, it's great. They're not charging you for tokens, but token usage that you have with ChatGPT is not going to be there forever. We talk about vendor lock-in. If you have a vendor lock-in and the vendor disappears, what happens to all those tokens and all the data that you have used? So you really have to think through and making a decision about the future state of the process, because as is, the cloud computing or tokenomics that you have, it's pretty much open for you, and they're giving it away for free. You can go to NVIDIA's NIM, sign up with the API key. They will give you access to all the tokens in the world, right? But the thing is, if it's not your token, somebody else has eyes on those tokens, and somebody's ability to look at your process and figure out what it is that you're doing, how it is you're doing it, and what works and what doesn't work. It's really troubling. So let's talk about IPing the processes, IPing the technology, because our people really need to be the one that wins the game at the end of the day. All right. So AI portfolio thinking. This is something that I talk about a lot in a lot of organizations, but I talk about it on day 2 and 3, right? Day 2 and 3 conversation means that if you are on day -1, which you haven't started with AI, but you have started with AI on day 0 and you're going to move forward on day 1, and then day 1 and beyond is where you have to do monitoring and triggering and figure out all the little glitches. And if you have a lot of feedback mechanism that's not working, you have to fix those rapidly, continuously. So you can imagine there's a lot of conversation to have between day 0 and 1. But the asset portfolio part of it is very important, because I talked about asset management for real estate if you have it, asset management for your data. What about asset portfolio for AI? So you go from DevOps, Data Ops, ML Ops to AI Ops. How do you manage all these stacks, and how do you create a portfolio around that? So this kind of goes back to that process as IP, because that process means that you are really running an operation that is really in need of other people that wants to copy and paste it. And when I say it, you're thinking about like, oh, this is science fiction. Well, you know about OpenClaw, you know about NemoClaw, you know about what's happening in the cloud, Claude Cowork and ChatGPT Codex. If you don't know those terms, look them up, and they will tell you exactly what I'm talking about, because these processes, the pipelines that you're developing, and the business relationship that you make is going to become your IP, right? Because everything after that, the process and product, is done by an agent, right? And agents could be very easily subdued with anybody with the right technology. So look at it from the AI portfolio. You develop an AI portfolio, your process is your AI, right? Your whole process is your AI, which is, again, quote unquote AI, not necessarily the intelligence part of it, because the intelligence still remains with the people. You can disagree with me on that, but that's my understanding of 86 billion neurons in the human brain, hundreds and millions of dendrites and trillions of synapses. Does not mean that, it's anywhere near something to be compared with a machine. This is my opinion, but I'm living with it. So I'm going to go to the next video, but as a portfolio, like I said, I talk about it on day 3 because this is something that it has to be really exclusively done through a strategy. You cannot operationalize it on day 1. It's an operationalization. You can operationalize the project to do AI portfolio, but you have to do it very strategically, meeting certain goals and fixing those goals as you go, so that way you see the full picture of AI portfolio, how that comes alive. So this is the last video before we move into the risk management. So check this out.
Decision science is a blend of economics, psychology, statistics, and management. It is the collection of quantitative techniques used to inform decision-making at the individual and population levels. It's all about understanding how we make decisions and using that knowledge to make better ones. Think of rational decision-making as a logical roadmap. Define your problem, list options, weigh the outcomes, and boom, choose the best path. But hey, we're human. We use mental shortcuts called heuristics, which can sometimes trip us up with biases like overconfidence or anchoring. Decision science also tackles how we handle risk and value outcomes. With big data, it's all about data-driven choices. From business to healthcare and even personal life, decision science helps optimize everything. Sure, there are challenges like unpredictable human behavior and data limitations, but with AI and machine learning on the rise, the future is bright for decision science. Decision science is a blend.
Okay, so we are going to move to risk management. But before I do that, there's our YouTube channel. We would love you to check out our videos as they come. But there's 500 some videos, so we don't expect you to see all of them. But most recent one, if you're interested, you can look to the titles and pick one that you like. Let's see. Again, we talk a lot about military veterans and focus on military veterans. So I apologize that we only will talk about risk management for maybe 7 minutes, and we probably have to spend a lot more time on risk management. But on a monthly to a week to month basis, if you meet for a community practice, these are sort of the conversations that you will have to have. You have to talk about opportunities. How do you optimize on those opportunities? And if that's adaptable, if that's something that you should buy into, and if you haven't bought into, why you haven't? Why did you say no to that, right? These sort of SWOT analysis, PESTEL analysis, you have to have continuously, because things are rapidly changing. Prices of hardware are changing. Prices of token is changing. Price of way of doing business is changing. The supply chain planning of helium, their LNGs, gas prices, data centers are increasingly at risk because you have these tools, but if you don't have a data center, how do you push those ideas into your organization? How do you do change management? How do you do decision management in a world where the data centers are probably suffering through a catastrophe right now, and they're coming through lots of problems that is just not fixable by producing more, because you need natural resources, let's say for example copper, to run this operation. You need helium to run this operation. You need LNG to run those operations. So these LNGs and heliums that is in a short supply, yes, they can come back online. That is a known thing around the internet, that helium will come back online, but it's not the helium that's the problem, it's the pure helium that's the problem. So when you're talking about operationalizing something, who has access to helium, who has access to copper, who has access to so many of those rare earth elements that we really need, there's so many informations out there about finding those things, but you really have to think about risk management in many levels. Because when we think about risk, we think about cybersecurity, but risk has a lot of supply chain planning considerations, especially with AI bill of materials. So one of the things that I mentioned before when we were beginning this conversation is CBOM. So these processing of CBOM is not something of a future state. So we're talking about mythos here. We're talking about Project Glasswing, because if you think about it from CBOM perspective, they will say it's PQC, post-quantum cryptography, right? Post-quantum encryption. Yeah, there's solutions that are out there that NIST is adopting, which is your post-quantum solutions. But you need today the CBOM because you want to figure out how would mythos take over your encryption and break those encryption, because mythos is something that is relentless when it comes to going around encryption. So when it comes to mythos, one of the things that you have to know about is that mythos is not a one-shot thing. Mythos is like, I'm going to try until I break it, until I succeed. And the fact is, it didn't even get the assignment to go target somebody. It just targeted somebody in random, right? So if the project is to go attack something and something, if I can give you a score of break this many, you're not even a target. You're just part of the stats, right? You are meeting that goal for the AI because AI was able to break your system, no matter how good encryptions you have in place or how many times you have pushed that encryption in place. So you have this encryption bill of materials. That means that you have encryption here, encryption here, encryption there, encryption there. Not all encryptions are equal, right? Some for your business process is far more important than none. So you have to have the CBOM kind of conversation. And the CBOMs are really something that people say, oh, we'll push that into our unknown unknown. The reason I bring it to their known unknown today is because of Mythos and Project Glasswing, which everybody knows Project Glasswing is being worked on Fortune 500 companies. But that does not mean that they're just going to solve your problem. They're just solving their infrastructure. But this is a good time for you to get into the CBOM, part of your risk management. And of course, we talked about data centers, and data centers are going to face a lot of these vulnerabilities. But internally, let's say, for example, you don't want to go through CBOM and data centers. So one of the things that you can do is talk about cloud. How much reliant are you on cloud, and how can you do hybrid cloud? Not because you want to bring back some information from the cloud, but because you have to spin up a whole operation that is local, on the edge, air gap, that doesn't rely on encryption. All of those things can be done in-house, so that way you can reduce your footprint into the encryption space. And what can be broken into, if you have a sort of like that inventory of portfolios, these portfolios stays really at home, and these other portfolios can live in the cloud. That's okay. So your vulnerabilities, your legal vulnerabilities, is something that you will have to talk about as well, because now the data that gets leaked, the data gets put out. How much longer can we say, well, I tried my best and there is no ways that I could have protected those data? So now, because of artificial intelligence, one of the things that are happening is that observability, right? People are able to track what have you done actually to protect those data. So if you don't know this, but you should know about this, is a CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. This is something that I've been involved with since 2019. First time I came across it, I thought it was really, really impressive. I thought it was really good, but people pushed back so much that it took almost since 2017 to 2025, November 2025, for it to become live. So now it's live. Now in 2027, if you are being audited, it's because of CMMC in the Department of Defense space, or even in the federal government space. You're going to see a lot of CMMC roll out. So what that means is that now you are being audited for your due diligence. So previously people were compliant. They'll say, yeah, I'm compliant. Don't worry about it. I am compliant. So, they will have a lot of these tricks to say, it's on my signature block, so I am compliant. But now this compliance are coming with audit. And these audits are very easy to do because of things called machine learning and artificial intelligence, LLMs, things that are like Mythos, right? By the way, Mythos is not the only game in the town. Mythos is a very on-time marketing plot, but that's not the main problem here. Main problem is how dangerous has Mythos become, because outside of Mythos, there's other programs that can do similar things as Mythos. Funny enough, Mythos got hacked. Go figure, like that doesn't even make sense. Somebody hacked in and got Mythos out. Okay, what do we do in that world? So yeah, there's so much to talk about in risk management, but like I said, I'm going to keep it very short. I'm going to keep it in 45 minutes. I really, really enjoy talking about these things to a camera all day long, but I really would love to see some feedback and hear from you about your thoughts on decision management, your ways of doing decision management that you've seen work. I want to hear about your risk management tools that you are using that is really working for you. And what are some of the things that are not working for you? Maybe we can talk about this as well, because OCM and the organizational change management really impacts 100% of everybody, right? Top tier to bottom tier, everybody is impacted by OCM. So when it comes to OCM and decision making and risk acceptance, how do we do this OCM, and what are some of your thoughts on OCM? I would really love to hear that. So I'm going to keep it under 45 minutes like I promised. If you're interested in learning more about what it is that we do, which is that we help you to make decisions in one day rather than 3 months and 4 months of endless discussions about all sorts of topics. We have a framework in place that can walk you through the opportunities briefly, but help you optimize them by lunchtime, right? And then the rest of the day, we'll talk about risk so you can roadmap on your risk acceptance. This is something that we can do in one day. So if you're not interested in one day, you just want to have lunch with us, we do a lot of lunch. We love lunch. So come and see us, meet us, talk to us, because we can get you some insights that if you don't know, at the end of the lunch, you will say, now I know, right? So looking forward to engaging with you guys. There's lots happening in this AI space. So keep your head up and don't let it down. But the majority part of it is that be on lookout, right? We talk a lot about mythos and Project Glasswings. That's all it's about. It's just becoming aware, but keep a lookout and keep tabs on what it is that you're looking at. This is very important. So without taking too much of your time, thank you so much for checking out AyAyAyAI, 5th year, 130 some episodes. We're really enjoying it, and we're looking forward to doing more of these. Thank you so much. Take care.